So the first answer that is coming out of the Oscars from the standpoint of, like this barriers and boundaries is that we need to actually break through relational barriers to eliminate isolation and heal. So another kind of smaller theme that I would combine with this is a whole lot of these movies have isolation, they have islands, they have a person who's the only one in a sea of whatever, filling in the blank. And so for me, this is I'm so passionate about this. This is where we kind of turn the corner in the show where it's like I could easily become prescriptive and easily I probably will end up getting on my soapbox because I feel like this is so important right now. And so this is what I feel like is the first push is this idea of relational barriers and us breaking through relational barriers.
And why do you think that is happening right now?
So why now? Okay, so this is me. This is all me. This is not in the movies, right? The reason I think that this is so important is that I feel like right now we just went through a moment that was, like Shaylin said, a really huge crisis with COVID, right? And if you think about it, we set up all of these physical barriers, okay? So we did masks, we did plastic between us, we did social distancing, obviously. And so we had all these barriers that were physical barriers, right? That we said, good. These are keeping us healthy. These are loving people by putting up these physical barriers, right? But at the same time, we also knew in our heart of hearts that this was creating relational barriers too, which was bad, right? That it was creating isolation, that it was creating that social distance was not only just physical, but it was emotional and it was relational. And so that dissonance in my mind is pretty huge, right? So
it's
again,
that complicated
it's
center
the
of good.
complicated center of good, right?
Yeah.
So here we are going, I got to do a physical barrier that's good, and yet a relational barrier that feels bad, right? And they're meshed together, okay? So the reason I think this is important is we live through this, and we haven't really processed this yet. And I feel like what we're doing in this moment in time, the reason that I feel like this is such a God moment, and this is why I'm getting so passionate about it, is because if you look back at 2020, I believe God was going, hey, you got to test your devotion and see if you'll be your brother's keeper. And this is what you've got to, this is what we figured out to do with that, right? But now I think God's going, okay, but now, you loved your neighbor by setting up these physical barriers. Now I need you to break through those barriers in order to love your neighbor. I need you to work really hard because there's all sort of these remnants of COVID that are still in the world. I mean, we still have physical remnants of COVID still. When I go to Walmart, I see more self-checkouts than I do people, doing the lines, right? So there's just these remnants of COVID that are still out there. We still have DoorDash. We still have all these things. I call it, what I call this thing is the long-term social COVID effect. The idea that we have this long-term aspect of trying to figure out how to break these relational barriers. Does this make sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting passionate. Yeah. So for me, it's just really important for us to figure out how do we do that, right? But it's probably much easier for us not to do it. So I want to throw up a slide here. This is a slide of every reason why we should continue to social distance. So I want to check with the audience here and see how many of you guys feel like it's just easier. Like it's just, like I don't know if you, yeah, exactly. It's just easier, right? For us to continue to kind of not physical social distance, but it may be even physical. Like how many of you guys, when you go to Walmart, you're like, even if the lane with the person is open, you're like, still I'm just going to go through the self-checkout. Yeah? All right, thank you for the honesty in the room. Yes. So there's just the ease in which relationally we just feel like it's just easier, not to break through these barriers. How about efficiency? So efficiency, how many of you guys remote work where you're just like, you know what? Easier to jump on Zoom, easier not to have to worry about traffic. It's just more efficient for us to not have to deal with that aspect of life. And what's robbed out of that is us being in community with and breaking through these relational barriers. How many of you guys, it's exhausting? I would say how many introverts are in the room? Yeah, there we go. So when you think about it, you're like, man, I got away during COVID with not having to go to that party, but that has those casseroles that I hate and all that kind of stuff with that person. You know, and for me, that was it. It was like, oh, wow, I got an excuse not to go to this party because I'm an introvert and I'm like, I don't really, you know. You guys felt the same way? It's just kind of exhausted to think of going and doing it again. And then the last piece is, it is hard for us to like get back with people because we feel like we might say something stupid, or it's just the embarrassing part of it. So that's kind of what I feel like we're faced with right now as far as reasons why we are relationally with barriers with each other. So that's kind of that concept. Now there also is stats around this too that I'd like to show you though. So here's the stat. There's tons of stats, but these are the ones that really broke my heart. So it says that, is it 60%? I can't read it. What is it, Chris?
60%.
60%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So 60% of people in the United States report feeling lonely on a regular basis. Okay? So that's what we're dealing with, you know, right now as far as relational barriers. This stat I just put up there because I thought, man, this is huge. 43% of teens say they use their phone to avoid interacting with people. It's not like they're on their phone just kind of doing stuff with people. It's they're using their phone going, okay, I'm going to be on my phone so I don't have to talk to people, you know? Those were like two statistics that was just like, why now? You know, like why? Hey, yeah, exactly. Why now? Why do we feel like this is the moment where we need to break through relational barriers? It's because this is the moment, right, where I do feel like God's like pushing us back into the playground almost, saying, here, go back into the playground, be with people, you know, and break through these relational barriers in which people are truly lonely out there, right?